Welcome to Shadows at Dusk. Dusk is not the end. It's the doorway between two worlds. A place where stories slip through, quiet, cold, and true. You've entered that space now, and what follows is meant for you. Stay in the shadow. The instant my fingers brushed against the worn leather spine, a tremor of wrongness shivered through me, a silent alarm I should have heeded at the Stillwater Lodge. But a fatal sort of curiosity, potent as poisoned wine, had already taken hold. By the time the full weight of my transgression settled, escape was a concept belonging to another lifetime. It was meant to be transient, a mere punctuation mark in the long sentence, driving me toward a new beginning on the coast. The Stillwater Lodge slumped by the highway, a two-tiered relic bleached by sun and indifference, likely glorious sometime during the Nixon administration. Yet it offered refuge from the road's hypnotic drone, and the price didn't bite. I swung the car into the sparsely populated lot as twilight bled across the sky. Inside, the air hung thick with the ghosts of long-dead cigarettes and the cloying sweetness of chemical pine. Behind the counter, a woman named Morwenna, her skin a tapestry of faded ink and her expression carved from granite, acknowledged my existence with a flicker of disinterest, barely glancing up from a dog-eared periodical. "Checkout's 11, she rasped, sliding the key, number 7, across the scarred formica. Did her gaze linger on the number? Did her knuckles whiten for a fraction of a second? Exhaustion blurred the edges of perception. The highway's endless ribbon had scoured my eyes raw. A shower, oblivion, that was the extent of my ambition. Room service met my meager expectations, wallpaper peeling like sunburnt skin, a bed that sighed under imaginary weight, a television set squatting in the corner like a primitive idol. Still, a certain tidiness prevailed, and the showerhead delivered a surprisingly vigorous spray. Just as a fragile hope for decent rest began to germinate, my eye caught it, an alien shape protruding from the shadowed realm beneath the bed frame. Detritus from a former occupant, surely. Crouching, I saw it was a book. No, a journal. Its cover softened and darkened by countless touches, intimate and old. I ought never to have opened it. That knowledge is diamond hard now. Then it felt like an innocent trespass, uncovering perhaps dull accounts of sales conferences or complaints about lukewarm coffee. The initial pages confirmed this banality, notes on travel itineraries, critiques of roadside diners. But deeper within, the script began to fray. Ink bled urgency, sentences fractured. "This place is askew," one passage declared. "The walls, they ripple when my back is turned, and the sounds after dark. Dear God, the sounds." An icy current traced my spine, yet the pages turned as if compelled by an external force. The subsequent entry descended further. Tried leaving, door sealed fast, bolted. No, I never touched the lock, wrestled it open finally, but the corridor, it wasn't the corridor I knew. It stretched into dimness, endless doors mirroring each other. Impossible, unreal. My own hands had begun to tremble, mirroring the script's deterioration. Page after page chronicled escalating terrors, shadows detaching from objects to crawl independently, whispers slithering from the plaster, a presence that materialized in the dead of night, a sentinel standing motionless beside the bed. The final words were a desperate scrawl, barely decipherable. Reader, flee. Flee now while you still can, before this place claims you, as it claimed me, as it claims us all. I snapped the journal shut, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs. A hoax? Elaborate? Cruel? Left to unnerve weary travelers? Yet as the thought formed, the room itself seemed to exhale, growing instantly colder. The shadows pooled in the corners, deepening, acquiring substance. Decision crystallized. Real or not, I wouldn't linger for the punchline. Bags snatched, I lunged for the door. The knob refused to turn. I threw my weight against it, solid, unyielding, as if fused to the frame. Panic, cold and sharp, began its insidious work. The window, escape route. But the sash remained stubbornly immobile, sealed against my frantic efforts. It was then, peering through the grimy glass, that the true horror began to coalesce. The parking lot, nearly vacant upon my arrival, now teemed with automobiles. Vehicles from every era, hulking 50s chrome, 70s muscle, boxy 80s sedans, crowded the asphalt, each draped in a uniform shroud of dust, silent testament to decades of stillness. Recoiling from the window, my thoughts scattered like frightened birds. A waking dream? Fatigue playing tricks on a frayed mind? I squeezed my eyes shut, inhaling deeply, anchoring myself to the count of 10. Normalcy would reassert itself upon opening. 1, 2, 3. A faint scratching emanated from within the walls, a dry, furtive sound. 4, 5, 6. Was the ceiling lowering, the walls subtly encroaching? 7, 8, 9. The scratching intensified, interwoven now with whispers, indistinct yet undeniably present. 10. My eyes snapped open. The room's dimensions remained, yet the atmosphere had shifted, grown dense, electric. Static prickled the hairs on my forearms, and the door stood ajar, revealing not the familiar dingy corridor, but a hallway of impossible length, receding into profound shadow. Every nerve ending screamed caution. Stay put. Wait for dawn. Dismiss this as a fever dream, born of exhaustion. But the whispers were coiling tighter. The shadows seemed poised to reach, and the room itself felt like a closing fist. I stepped across the threshold. Instantly, the mundane dissolved. Gone were the cheap carpets and water-stained ceilings. Dark, gleaming wood paneled the walls, reflecting the spectral glow of unseen light sources. Elegant wallpaper shimmered with intricate, unsettling patterns. Doors, identical and numerous, marched away in both directions, their polished surfaces absorbing the dim light. I began to walk, propelled by the desperate need for stairs, for the lobby, for the mundane reality of the highway beyond. Yet the corridor offered no egress, only an infinite repetition of itself, an Escher print nightmare made real. Time lost all meaning in that endless passage. Minutes bled into hours, or perhaps hours compressed into seconds. Behind certain doors, I sensed muffled life, fragments of conversation, stifled weeping. Once, chillingly, I heard my own laughter echo faintly, triggered by a joke lost to memory. Finally, depleted, sanity fraying, I halted before a door indistinguishable from the countless others. Some intuition, Perhaps a nascent recognition guided my hand. The knob turned smoothly. I stood in my own childhood bedroom, not a facsimile, but the room itself, resurrected across decades. My cherished model planes hung suspended from the ceiling. Posters of forgotten rock idols adorned the walls. Seated on the edge of the narrow bed was myself, aged 10, gazing up with a smile that failed to ignite his eyes. "You took your time," he murmured, his voice unnaturally resonant. "We've been expecting you." I stumbled backward, shaking my head, a denial forming soundlessly. This wasn't real. Turning to flee, I found the hallway vanished. Now I stood in my college dormitory room, another me, older, hunched over a textbook at the familiar scarred desk. "Don't you recall?" This iteration inquired softly. "Checking in? We all check in eventually." I spun, disoriented, but every turn revealed another space plucked from my past, my first cramped apartment, the sterile office where I'd toiled, hotel rooms from forgotten vacations. And in each tableau, another version of Elias watched with the same profound, weary sorrow. "Leaving isn't an option," they chorused, a symphony of my own voice across time. "None of us ever leave. This is where we belong." Something fractured deep within my consciousness. Suppressed memories surged, not of one arrival, but of countless check-ins at this very lodge, reading this same diary, the frantic attempts at escape, the inevitable return. A devastating clarity descended. I had never departed. The cross-country journey, the new job, illusions spun by a mind trapped in a recurring loop. I had always been here. As this truth settled, heavy as grave dirt, the phantom rooms dissolved. I found myself back in room 7. It was precisely as I had first encountered it, down to the corner of the leather-bound journal peeking from beneath the bed. With hands that felt ancient and unsteady, I retrieved it, opening it to the final, desperate entry. The script was shaky, urgent. It was undeniably my own. "Reader, flee. Flee now while you still can, before this place claims you, as it claimed me, as it claims us all." Carefully, I replaced the journal in its hiding place. Then, I sat on the edge of the sagging bed and waited. Soon, knuckles would rap against the door. A new traveler, weary from the road, seeking shelter in room 7. The cycle, patient and inexorable, would turn once more. Because that is the immutable truth of the Stillwater Lodge. Check-in is always permitted. Check-out is eternally denied. The highway hypnosis was profound, a relentless spooling of white lines dissolving under the chassis hours after dusk had bled into true night. 2 a.m. gnawed at the edges of consciousness, the air inside the car stale with the recycled chill of state lines crossed unseen. Eyes burned, spine ached. The pilgrimage demanded respite, not the brash fluorescence of a travel plaza, teeming with forced wakefulness, but quietude, solitude. A discreet sign swam out of the gloom, Vista Point. It would suffice. Emptiness reigned. A sparse constellation of sodium lamps cast weak, jaundiced circles upon the asphalt, fragile islands adrift in an ocean of shadow. Vacancy stretched in regimented lines, painted slots waiting for occupants who never arrived. I eased the car beneath the hesitant glow of the nearest lamp, a meager bulwark against the enveloping dark, and unfolded myself stiffly into the night. The air, sharp and carrying a damp weight, seized my skin as vertebrae popped, protesting the long hours of stillness. Barely a minute had elapsed, the engine's heat ticking away into the cool, when my peripheral vision snagged on movement, or rather, stillness. A figure stood, poised precisely at the boundary where light surrendered to absolute black. An older woman draped in something hooded, utterly immobile. Her presence was a palpable weight, her attention fixed solely upon me. Shadow veiled her face, leaving only the impression of eyes, twin apertures of darkness that seemed to drink the feeble light unblinking. "Are you okay?" The words felt brittle, fragile in the immense quiet. No reply, not the slightest shift in posture, just that unwavering, silent regard. A tremor, born not of cold, but of something deeper, traced a path along my nerves. Lost, perhaps? A late rendezvous? Yet her profound inertia, the void where any human reaction should reside, began to twist unpleasantly in my gut. One tentative step forward, an offering across the intervening space. Like quicksilver, she retreated, dissolving backward into the unlit expanse as if the darkness itself possessed agency, inhaling her whole. Gone, without a trace. I stood locked in place, caught between the impulse to investigate and an instinctive screaming sense of wrongness. This isolation, this charged silence, this apparition, it resonated with deep discord. Retreat was the only sane option. My hand reached, seeking the cold reassurance of the door handle. And then, a sound, ephemeral as breath on frost, yet unmistakable. Help me. My fingers froze, hovering inches from escape. The plea, a mere filament of sound, emanated from the void where she had vanished. I pivoted, eyes straining, attempting to penetrate the gloom beyond the light's ragged perimeter. Nothing but impenetrable blackness unfurled. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed by the waiting silence. "Is everything all right?" Only the low, electric hum of the lamps offered a response. A fierce, internal conflict erupted. Primal instinct shrieked for flight, yet that fragile whisper had snagged on some vestigial thread of duty. Hesitantly, cautiously, I advanced, drawn toward the threshold of shadow. "Can I help you?" I murmured the question. Without warning, without a rustle of fabric or scuff of soul, she materialized, directly before me, startlingly close. She hadn't emerged from the darkness, she had simply recoalesced within the light. Her complexion possessed the grayish pallor of ancient vellum stretched taut over bone. Her eyes, sunken orbits of profound shadow, latched onto mine with a gravitational pull that felt physical, chilling me to the marrow. "Help me," she breathed again, the sound incongruously small, almost infantile. A reflexive step backward, my pulse a frantic drumming against my ribs. "Are you lost? Do you need me to call someone?" Silence was her only answer, save for the relentless pressure of her stare. Her mouth hung slightly open, her gaze wide, unnervingly vacant yet fiercely focused. The damp night air felt suddenly glacial. A tremor began in my hands. Confusion warred with a rising tide of dread. She presented as someone needing aid, yet an undeniable aura of the unnatural radiated from her, a silent alarm shrieking from those hollow eyes. "I have a phone," I managed, my voice a thin, reedy thing. "I can call for help." For the briefest instant, her focus wavered, a flicker deep within the darkness, before she executed a slow, deliberate negation, a headshake unnervingly like a marionette's. Her eyes instantly snapped back to mine. "Can you take me?" The whisper was a dry rustle, barely disturbing the air. "Take you where?" The question felt thick, unwilling on my tongue. No reply. Instead, a hand emerged from the concealing folds of her garment, fingers impossibly long and pale, skeletal, trembling faintly as they extended toward me. Another involuntary step back. Every nerve shrieked, danger, escape, now. But I was paralyzed, impaled by that desolate face, those bottomless eyes. She drifted closer, the seeking hand unwavering, her gaze pinning me, dissecting me. A bead of icy sweat trickled down my temple. My muscles seized, breath trapped in my lungs. Her stare felt ancient, invasive, plumbing depths I never knew existed within me. Then, as suddenly as the encounter began, the tension fractured. Her hand fell limply to her side. Her gaze dropped to the stained asphalt, her entire form seeming to contract, shoulders slumping beneath some invisible burden. She took a single, fluid step backward and was instantly reabsorbed by the shadows, vanished. The abrupt release left me gasping, heart hammering against my sternum like a frantic prisoner. Confusion evaporated, replaced by pure, unadulterated urgency. Leave. I whirled toward the sanctuary of the car, fingers clumsy, numb, fumbling with the handle. The latch yielded, relief surged, fatally premature. A touch, colder than the ambient chill, impossibly damp, clamped onto my shoulder. Ice flooded my veins, stealing my breath, stopping my heart mid-beat. "Don't leave." The whisper coiled directly beside my ear, intimate, terrifyingly close, carrying the faintest aroma of disturbed earth and decay. I spun around, a strangled sound tearing from my throat. Nothing. Only the vacant tarmac, the buzzing lamps casting their sickly, unreliable glow, and the vast, inscrutable darkness waiting patiently at the edge of everything. No further thought was necessary. I flung myself into the driver's seat, slamming the door with a crack that echoed unnaturally in the stillness. Locks snicked down, a fragile defense. My hands, slick and trembling, fought for purchase on the steering wheel. A frantic sweep of the surrounding gloom revealed only emptiness. She was gone, or simply unseen. The engine roared, protesting the sudden demand, my foot unsteady on the pedal. Escape, distance, urgency propelled me. Tires uttered a faint squeal as I wrenched the car from the desolate lot, eyes riveted to the asphalt ribbon unreeling before me, consciously resisting the treacherous allure of the rearview mirror. Yet glance I did, again and again, my own wide eyes reflected over the receding blackness, half expecting those hollow sockets to materialize in the glass. Only empty road stared back, mills blurred beneath frantic acceleration before the harsh, sterile lights of a 24-hour fuel station offered a fragile haven. Parked beneath its unwavering glare, engine silenced, the tremors continued unabated, my thoughts a maelstrom of disbelief and fear. Who or what had she been? What phantom touch lingered still on my shoulder? The questions remained, unanswered, ultimately irrelevant, beside the single, immutable truth etched deep into my psyche. That forsaken overlook, cradled in the deepest folds of the night, was a place I would never, under any circumstances, revisit. The key, cold and archaic, turned stiffly in the lock of the old Lyceum just past midnight. Elias hefted his battered piano case, the small torch in his other hand cutting a nervous swathe through the gloom. Public hours had long passed. The building manager, after some persuasion and the promise of rent for this spectral rehearsal hall, had entrusted him with access. Solitude was what Elias craved, and sanctuary undisturbed. The moment the heavy door clicked shut behind him, the air thickened, stale and redolent of damp timber and forgotten things. Corridor lights remained extinguished, his torch beam the sole guide, painting fleeting circles on the stone flags where his solitary footfalls reverberated, stark reminders of the profound silence. He navigated the main artery of the building, found the designated practice chamber, and turned another key. The hinges emitted a low, protracted groan, as if lamenting the intrusion into decades of slumber. Elias, a pianist whose aspirations currently outstripped his means, couldn't afford the gleaming studios elsewhere. This forgotten chamber, however vast and neglected, was a bargain, promising the isolation necessary for true concentration. Inside, a cavernous stage dominated the space, a few spectral chairs huddled like refugees in one corner. Dust lay thick as velvet on every surface, obscuring the windows in a grimy film. Center stage, a grand piano, a behemoth of ebony, slumbered beneath the accumulated neglect. Setting his case upon a chair, Elias produced a cloth, meticulously wiping down the piano bench. Its corners frayed, the upholstery split, the wood scarred, imperfections he readily ignored. He sought only the music. With a soft whoosh, he peeled back the instrument's cover. Old, yes, but seemingly intact. Tentative fingers brushed the keys. Notes emerged, uneven in their power but fundamentally sound. He commenced with a simple scale, his fingers clumsy in the hall's pervasive chill. A visible plume escaped his lips with each breath. Zipping his jacket higher offered little solace. Its heating, if it existed, was dormant. More scales followed, a necessary ritual to limber digits stiffened by the cold. Initially, routine grounded him, the posture of his wrists, the clean articulation of ascending and descending notes. Then, sharp and sudden, an icy prickle traced the nape of his neck. It felt like a draft from an unseen fissure, yet the door was shut fast, the windows sealed by grime. He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. Dust motes hung suspended, undisturbed in the torchlight. A shrug, a dismissal. He returned to the keys. Minutes later, immersed in a delicate passage demanding finesse in the upper register, he struck a particular C sharp. Instantly, the temperature plummeted, not a gradual cooling, but an abrupt plunge into glacial stillness. His arms seized. His fingertips felt numb despite the jacket. Again, he scanned the empty space behind him. Nothing. Perhaps a faulty vent, a gap beneath the door. He tried to rationalize, pushing the thought away. Playing the same sequence again, fingers finding the familiar keys, he heard it. A distinct, dry rasp from behind, the sound of a shoe dragging lightly across the floorboards. He stopped dead, twisting sharply. The torch beam stabbed towards the corner, illuminating the stacked chairs. Immobile and silent, nothing stirred. A forceful exhale, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. He turned back to the piano. He resumed playing, though focus became elusive, snagged on the persistent feeling of wrongness. During the next run-through, a note, perfectly tuned moments before, suddenly soured, distorting as if the string itself had momentarily warped. He lifted his finger, yet the discordant sound lingered unnaturally before fading. Pressing the key again yielded a normal tone. He checked the pedal, ensuring no resonance lingered through his own action. Normal. He attempted the passage once more. This time, a subtle shift on the bench beside him, the unmistakable impression of weight settling near his hip. He froze. His left hand cautiously patted the worn velvet beside him. Nothing but empty space. The sensation vanished as quickly as it came, leaving his pulse racing. A break was needed. Elias crossed the stage, retrieving his water bottle. His hand trembled as he drank, the liquid barely soothing the dryness in his throat. Pacing the perimeter of the hall helped steady his nerves. The walls bore witness to a forgotten era, faded photographs, brittle announcements for recitals long past. He paused before a framed certificate honoring some bygone instructor. The dates yellowed with age, the glass fractured. After several minutes adrift in these relics, the imperative to practice drew him back. He resolved to ignore the unsettling phenomena, attributing them to an overactive imagination fueled by the eerie setting. He launched into a piece destined for an upcoming recital, intricate and demanding, requiring shifts in dynamics and careful pedal work. He anchored himself in technique, regulated his breathing, kept his eyes fixed on the ivory landscape before him. Then, amidst a pianissimo section, gossamer light, something colder than the ambient air, brushed his neck. Not a draft. Fingers, a spectral caress. His entire frame went rigid. His foot slipped from the pedal, shattering the sustained chord into messy dissonance. His head snapped around. Emptiness greeted him. A crawl of icy dread traversed his arms. He sprang up, scanning the hall with wide eyes, then descended the stage steps, sweeping his torch beam across the rows of vacant seats, the heavy dust-laden curtains, the distant exit doors. Nothing but shadows and silence. A choked laugh escaped him. Was he truly losing his mind? Yet the pockets of intense cold near the piano were undeniable. He remounted the stage, heart still hammering. Perhaps defiance was the answer. He chose a bolder piece, loud and vigorous, hoping its force would banish his unease. But midway through the composition, the piano's voice faltered again. Pitches subtly sagged, a fractional shift rendering the melody awkward, almost drunken. He slowed, pressing each note with deliberate care, testing. Normalcy returned. Rubbing his temples, he sighed. The instrument clearly needed a technician's hand. Just then, a whisper, faint as exhaled breath, curled near his ear. Indecipherable, a mere sigh of sound, yet intimate. His skin erupted in gooseflesh. He leapt from the bench, backing away, pacing again, torch probing the deep corners, the recesses behind the stage curtain. Nothing. He clicked the torch off, plunging the hall into near-total darkness, save for the faint green glow of an emergency exit sign. Standing utterly still, listening, breathing raggedly, his lungs felt constricted, a dull ache starting behind his eyes. A moment passed in the thick darkness before he fumbled for his phone, No signal bars illuminated the screen in this stone tomb. The battery indicator showed half charge. Leaving felt sensible, yet the need to practice warred with a burgeoning, unnerving curiosity. Something in this place resonated, called to him. Returning to the piano, he sat, deciding on a slow, calming adagio. The first minute unfolded without incident. He began to relax, focusing on posture, expression. Then the chill returned, sharp enough to make his breath fog before him, stinging his eyes. His hands grew stiff, but he persevered, driven by a stubborn resolve. That's when another sound emerged, a low groan, seemingly originating from beneath the stage itself. He stopped instantly, pressing his ear against the piano's wooden flank. Silence. He rose, walked to the stage lip, and knelt, peering into the narrow gap beneath the floorboards. Darkness impenetrable. Tapping the wood yielded a solid thud, yet a peculiar draft emanated from the gap, cold enough to make his eyes water. Turning back, he saw it. A single key, high on the keyboard, depressed silently, held down as if by a gentle, invisible finger. No sound issued forth. Perhaps it was merely stuck. He approached cautiously, touched the key lightly. It sprang back into place. A wave of weakness washed through his legs. He sank onto the bench, gathering his resolve, fingers hovering. He decided to play that specific note. The instant he pressed it, a vortex of cold air swirled around him. His teeth began to chatter. An inexplicable pressure settled onto his shoulders. He forced himself to continue, building a tentative melody, testing each note, watching for the reaction. Deeper into the tune, the anxiety lessened slightly, replaced by a strange sense of being guided by the music itself. Then the bizarre occurred. His hands began to move independently. He knew the piece he intended, but the notes emerging were alien. He fought for control, but his fingers flew across the keys, compelled by an external will. His heart hammered against his ribs. He tried to wrench his hands away, but they felt glued to the ivory, palms slick with sweat. The resulting chords were dissonant, yet flowed with a disturbing internal logic. His wrists began to ache from the unseen force pressing them down. Gritting his teeth, Elias yanked his hands back with a surge of effort. The music fractured into silence. His arms throbbed. He gasped for breath. The oppressive cold seemed to recede slightly. He flexed his fingers, finding them trembling, his wrists taut. He paced the stage again, catching his breath. The urge to flee warred with the insistent pull of the mystery. Perhaps proof was possible. He retrieved his phone, activated the video recorder, and propped it on the music stand, angled towards the keyboard. He would film himself playing. Maybe the lens could capture what his eyes could not. He began a simple, repetitive sequence, something mechanical to allow his senses to roam the environment. The phone screen glowed, reflecting his tense face. After a minute, the familiar chill returned, his breath clouding the air. Keeping his eyes glued to the screen, he glimpsed it, a fleeting, indistinct shadow flickering behind his reflection, gone in an instant. His pulse leapt, but he played on. Suddenly, a struck note audibly bent, the pitch warping sickeningly. He watched his own hands on the small screen. They were playing correctly, yet the sound was wrong. Adrenaline surged. He pressed harder, and an entire chord flattened momentarily before snapping back to true. At that precise moment, the phone screen sputtered. The video feed froze. then winked into blackness. He snatched it up, jabbing the power button futilely. Dead. The battery, moments ago half full, was utterly drained. A curse died on his lips. Setting the useless device aside, he felt a tingling numbness creep up his arms, his head strangely light. He took another swig of water, the chill settling deep in his stomach, a premonition of forces beyond his comprehension. He resolved to find the source of the cold. He moved deliberately around the stage, running his hand along the heavy velvet curtains, damp, smelling of mildew. At the back of the hall stood a small storage closet. The doorknob, rusted and stiff, resisted at first, then yielded with a protesting creak. A potent wave of damp cardboard and decay rolled out. Inside, revealed by his torch beam, skeletal music stands, broken chairs, a cracked mirror leaning drunkenly. The air was thick but strangely not colder here, just clutter and neglect. He closed the door, the click echoing unnervingly, and walked back towards the waiting piano. An irrational magnetism drew him back to the bench, fear warring with fascination. His stomach twisted, his pulse throbbed in his ears. He sat, placing his hands above the keys, testing a few notes, waiting. Silence held for a beat. Then a blast of frigid air struck his back, making his shoulders hunch defensively. The black keys felt like chips of ice beneath his fingertips. A faint susurrus brushed past his left ear. His breathing hitched. He pressed a chord, and the sound vibrated oddly. The piano's massive lid rattled faintly, shifting almost imperceptibly, as if nudged. He continued, weaving a simple melody, his heartbeat a deafening percussion. As he played, the chords began to morph again, his muscles locking, the tune twisting into that unsettling, unfamiliar pattern. He closed his eyes briefly, feeling a strange, swaying sensation, a descent into trance. His mind grew foggy, yet the playing continued, shallow breaths catching in his throat, his skin numb. He was no longer the player, merely the vessel, unable to break free. His arms trembled as they swept the keyboard, the music swelling in volume without conscious effort, sounding deeper, richer, as though phantom hands played alongside his own. Then a voice, quiet, yet perfectly clear, intimately close. It spoke his name, Ilias. His heart seized. He stopped playing, spinning around so violently he nearly tumbled from the bench. Nothing. Only the vast, waiting emptiness. Sweat beaded on his forehead. He fought to regain his breath, the silence of the hall pressing in, broken only by the frantic thumping in his chest. Enough. He stood, snatched his phone, shoved it into his pocket. He bundled his rag away, zipped the piano case shut. Leaving the stage, he locked the rehearsal room door behind him, the click unnaturally loud. He walked quickly through the darkened corridor, casting nervous glances over his shoulder, expecting pursuit from the shadows. Nothing moved. The silence felt heavier now, pregnant with unspoken things. Questions swirled unanswerable. Reaching the great front doors, he fumbled with the key, finally twisting it, pushing outside into the welcome shock of the cold night street. The city air felt clean, grounding. His breath hitched, a ragged sigh escaping into the darkness. He knew, even as relief washed over him, that he would return. An inexplicable compulsion, a resonance struck within that hall, demanded it. Something there had reached out through the discordant notes, the chilling touches. He needed to understand, perhaps even to communicate. He had to discover what lingered within the shadowed heart of the old Lyceum. His hands still shook at the memory, yet the decision was made. Tomorrow night, he would go back. He would try again to capture evidence, to decipher the presence that spoke through the borrowed music. He had to know. Curious, the way primal awareness bypasses cognition entirely. One moment, Ilara was simply ambling along the path, immersed in the woodland hush, the resinous perfume of pines, the satisfying disintegration of fallen leaves beneath her boots. Everything held the shape of normalcy until abruptly it fractured. Lost in some meandering thought, she was suddenly pierced by a profound disquiet, a vibration of wrongness she couldn't name, but felt deep in her marrow, an intuition demanding heed. She preferred hiking unaccompanied, a frequent indulgence, particularly within this specific preserve. Unsung, uncelebrated, it offered sanctuary from the throng, a quietude she cherished. Just Ilara, the trees, the sky. This particular track wasn't even etched onto the park's formal charts. She'd stumbled upon it weeks prior, a slender artery diverging from the sanctioned route, delving into the sylvan depths. Her last visit hadn't taken her its full length. Today, however, beckoned exploration. The further she ventured, the more profound the stillness became. The familiar forest chorus, avian calls, the furtive rustle of unseen creatures in the undergrowth, attenuated, dissolving until only the sighing wind and the cadence of her own tread remained. Initially, it wasn't sinister. A deep tranquility settled. Here, the trees stood sentinel, ancient, their boughs interlacing into a dense, emerald vault far overhead. Sunlight, fractured by foliage, dappled the earth in shifting mosaics, painting long, ephemeral shadows across the loam. But the sensation of being observed materialized without preamble. She halted, every nerve straining, listening. Silence, save for the wind's whisper through the leaves. Yet the fine hairs on her nape prickled erect. Her gaze swept the surrounding woods, a slow, deliberate scan for any flicker of movement. Nothing stirred. She was utterly alone. Attempting to dismiss the unease as mere woodland nerves, she pressed onward, chiding her own paranoia. Solitude in the deep woods naturally bred apprehension, didn't it? Yet with each step, the feeling intensified, coalescing into a certainty. Unseen eyes tracked her from the umbra between the trunks. Then she saw it, or rather, him, a silhouette initially indistinct in the distance, planted immobile upon the trail ahead. Ilara froze, her pulse slamming against her ribs like a trapped bird. Perhaps 100 feet separated them. He faced her directly, though distance obscured any features, rendering him a mere outline, tall, utterly still. A fleeting impulse urged retreat. Encounters on trails weren't unheard of, surely, but this felt intrinsically different. His posture possessed an unnatural rigidity, a stillness too absolute, bordering on the lithic. And his arrival had been soundless. No snap of twig, no scuff of boot. He had simply appeared. Raising a hand, she offered a tentative wave, striving for nonchalance. "Hello?" she called out, the sound jarringly loud in a pervasive quiet. Silence answered. He remained fixed, unmoving, a statue draped in shadow. Though his face was illegible, she felt the weight of his regard, an invisible pressure. Her instincts screamed reversal, flight, but her limbs felt rooted, weighted with sudden dread. "It's fine," she insisted internally. "Just another hiker, maybe disoriented, lost." But a deeper current whispered, "Wrong. This is wrong." Hesitantly, she took a single step forward, her eyes locked on the distant form. Another step. As if tethered by invisible threads, the figure mirrored her advance, taking one measured step toward her. Ilara stopped. So did he. Ice water seemed to sluice down her spine. Experimentally, she stepped back. Again, the silent mimicry. He retreated in perfect synchrony. She risked another step forward. He matched it. Her heart now hammered a frantic rhythm against her sternum. Whatever game this was, whatever anomaly stood before her, she had no desire to ascertain its rules or its conclusion. She spun, abandoning any pretense of calm, and strode rapidly back the way she'd come. She resisted the urge to look back, not immediately, but after perhaps a minute, the compulsion became unbearable. A quick glance over her shoulder confirmed her fear. He was following, visible through the lattice of trees, still distant, but undeniably closer. His pace wasn't rushed. It was deliberate, unhurried, as if time were an irrelevance to him. Her brisk walk escalated to a jog, then dissolved into a desperate, pounding run. The absurdity struck her, a panicked sprint down a woodland path, the very picture of a B-movie victim. But logic was overwhelmed by raw, primal terror. Escape was the only imperative. The path coiled, snaking through the trees, momentarily hiding her pursuer, but the visceral certainty of being hunted, a cold dread gripping her insides, never waned. Her breath tore raggedly in her throat. Her muscles screamed with exertion as she forced herself faster, faster. The main trail couldn't be far, yet the woods seemed to stretch infinitely, time distorting under duress. Then finally, she burst from the dense undergrowth onto the wider, familiar path, stumbling to a halt, gulping air. Her lungs burned. Her heart thudded so violently it ached. Whirling around, she braced herself, expecting the figure to emerge from the trees behind her, but there was nothing. The narrow side trail she'd just fled was simply woods. Trees swayed softly, innocuously, in the afternoon breeze. No pursuer, no footsteps, no sign, as if he had dissolved into the very air. She stood there, catching her breath, her mind a frantic scramble. Had she hallucinated the entire encounter? Had isolation and suggestion conjured a phantom from the forest's shadows? No. The memory was too sharp, too real. The stillness, the mirroring, the silent pursuit. It had happened. She didn't linger. The rest of the way back to the parking lot was a near jog, punctuated by frequent, fearful glances over her shoulder. Each time, the trail behind her remained stubbornly empty. Reaching her car felt like reaching sanctuary. She tossed her pack onto the passenger seat, scrambled inside, and slammed the locks home. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as she fumbled the key into the ignition, her thoughts still reeling, trying to impose order on the terrifying illogic of the past hour. Driving away, Her eyes flicked constantly to the rearview mirror, half expecting to see the tall, still figure standing at the tree line, watching her departure. The road behind remained vacant. She drove for miles without stopping, putting distance between herself and an unsettling quiet of the preserve. Yet even as the miles accumulated, the sensation lingered, a persistent prickle of being watched, the chilling possibility that a glance into the mirror might reveal him seated silently behind her, his unseen eyes fixed upon her reflection. For days, the incident replayed itself relentlessly in her mind. She tried rationalizing it away, some solitary eccentric playing a cruel prank. But conviction eluded her. Something about the figure's unnerving stillness, the way it had shadowed her with such silent, implacable purpose, felt fundamentally alien, defying mundane explanation. A week later, compelled by a need for confirmation, she returned to the park, this time accompanied by a friend, sticking resolutely to the main, charted trails under the bright cloak of midday. The woods felt ordinary, peaceful even, but arriving at the juncture where the narrow side path should have branched off, Ilara stopped cold. It wasn't there. She walked to the exact spot, scanning the tree line, the undergrowth. Nothing. No faint indentation in the earth, no subtle parting of the foliage. It was seamless, unbroken woodland, as if the path she had discovered, explored, and fled in terror had never existed at all. Her friend eyed her, puzzled. "You sure this was the place?" he asked. Ilara nodded slowly, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. She was certain. She knew that path had been real. She had walked it, and now it was gone, swallowed by the woods, erased like a fleeting, nightmarish thought. Solitude on asphalt, under a starless vault, offered its own unique communion. The engine's low thrum, a mechanical mantra against the enveloping dark, the ribbon of road unfurling into nothingness. This was my sanctuary for untangling thought. Yet on this particular passage down a desolate artery of highway, the quietude I courted soured, curdling into something cold and watchful. It began as a flicker in the rear view, twin points of luminescence blooming far behind, insignificant at first. Another traveler swallowed by the night, but these lights held their station, not receding, not advancing, simply there. Two distant, unwavering eyes pinning me to the vast, empty stage of the road. They mirrored my velocity with unsettling precision. The dashboard glowed, 2:13 a.m. Miles had bled away without a single sign of civilization. No beacons from towns, no slumbering service stations, just the void. My knuckles whitened on the wheel. A tremor of disquiet snaked through me. Just another night owl, I reasoned, exercising caution. Logical, except the knot in my gut tightened, refusing reason. 65 miles per hour, the speedometer read. A gentle nudge on the accelerator, easing up to 70, then 75. A fractional pause. A breath held. Then the twin orbs behind me surged in perfect, silent concert, maintaining their calculated distance. That's when the cold certainty hit. This wasn't coincidence. My pulse became a frantic drummer against my ribs. Who piloted that shadow vessel? What purpose propelled their relentless pursuit? Why this silent, unnerving chase instead of simply overtaking. The ribbon ahead remained barren, offering no turnoff, no sanctuary. Panic, sharp and metallic, began its ascent. Stopping felt like surrender. Continuing felt like being herded, 80 miles per hour. The lights held fast, 85. They mirrored the climb. Subtlety died. My foot crushed the pedal, the engine screaming protest as the needle swept past 90. The world outside dissolved into streaks of gray and black. For a heartbeat, hope flickered. Had I broken the tether? No. Like a phantom limb, the lights accelerated, locked in their orbital path behind me. Purposeful, inescapable. My mind scrambled for options, finding only dead ends. No refuge beckoned from the roadside gloom. The phone, a useless brick in my palm, displayed the stark reality. No signal, utterly, terrifyingly alone. Desperation clawed. What if I braked, forced a confrontation? Would doors open? Figures emerge from the glare. Imagination painted scenarios, each darker than the last. Then the impossible. Without prelude, without fade, the pursuing lights simply ceased to be. One moment, their glare burned in the mirror. The next, only the profound blackness of the highway remained. I blinked, reflexively easing off the accelerator, vision sweeping the void behind. Nothing. Had fatigue conjured a phantom? A stress-induced hallucination? No. They were real. They had shadowed me for agonizing miles, and now oblivion. My car coasted, momentum bleeding away as my heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Did they take some unseen turn? A dirt track swallowed by the night? It didn't fit the instantaneous vanishing. I urged the car onward, trying to leash the fear, but the disquiet lingered, a cold residue. The clock showed 2:30 a.m. Just reached the end, I chanted internally. It's over. Then they were back. Not distant sparks, but blazing suns filling the rearview mirror, clinging to my bumper with terrifying intimacy. A gasp tore from my throat. Tremors seized my hands on the wheel. How? How had they closed the distance so silently, so instantaneously? A panicked swerve was met with an identical shift from the pursuer. They were fused to my shadow, their beams searing, invasive. Suddenly they surged, impossibly close, the chrome maw of their unseen vehicle poised to devour my trunk. Instinct screamed. I wrenched the wheel, tires protesting, narrowly averting impact. The light became absolute, a blinding white nova that bleached the world, erasing road, sky, self. And in the heart of that incandescence, gone, again, vanished. I stomped the brakes, the car fishtailing on the asphalt verge. Wild-eyed, I scanned the suffocating darkness behind me. Empty. Utterly, preternaturally empty. No engine noise faded into the distance. No taillights dwindled. Just silence and the immense, indifferent night. Uncontrollable tremors racked my hands. My chest felt banded with ice. What was this? How could solid matter, light, velocity, simply dissolve into nothingness? Twice? I sat frozen, engine idling, breath coming in ragged bursts, struggling to impose logic on the illogical. No sensible explanation surfaced. I didn't linger to tempt fate a third time. Foot hard on the accelerator, I fled down the highway, gaze flicking compulsively to the mirrors, expecting, dreading, the return of those phantom lights. They never came. The asphalt ribbon remained blessedly, unnervingly vacant. Only when the fluorescent halo of a remote fuel station bloomed ahead did I dare pull over, shutting off the engine with trembling fingers. I remained there for an age, the silence profound after the engine's hum, my pulse gradually descending from its frantic peak, the night's events replaying in a terrifying loop. Prank? Hallucination? Or something altogether other, spawned from the lonely fabric of the deep night? I possess no answers, only the chilling memory and the unshakable vow to never again travel that particular stretch of darkness alone. Dusk bled across the sky as my automobile navigated the approach, its headlamps momentarily snaring the oxidized filigree of the iron gate and the brooding stone sentinels flanking it. From this vantage, Blackwood Manor projected an air of profound vacancy, yet pinpricks of warm illumination hinted at life within its shadowed recesses. Repurposed into a guest house, it was here I'd arranged a sojourn, ostensibly to gather material for my treatise on architectural relics. The truth, however, lay closer to the whispers that clung to the place like ivy, murmurs of voices entombed in the plaster of inexplicable drafts that slithered down corridors. Whether phantoms of local lore or genuine phenomena, I intended to discern for myself. My luggage waited. I was eager to cross the threshold, establish my temporary claim, and commence my peculiar investigation. Inside, the foyer swam in umbra. A modest table served as the reception point, bearing a guest ledger bound in cracked leather, a telephone of antique design, and a tarnished brass bell. The proprietor, a man whose face seemed etched with weariness, recited the house ordinances with practiced monotony. Extinguish all smoking materials indoors. Repasts served at dawn and dusk, and strictly avoid certain dilapidated wings where the floorboards threatened collapse. He presented a key, heavy and time-worn, attached to a large oval fob. One side bore an intricate, unfamiliar sigil carved into the metal, a detail I registered but chose not to query, my immediate desire being the solace of my assigned chamber. I ascended a broad staircase, hemmed by rows of faded portraits, their painted gazes seemingly tracking my progress. Each riser groaned beneath my tread, releasing the scent of aged wood polish and settled dust into the stagnant air. The upper landing stretched into a corridor steeped in an unnerving quietude, as if I were the sole occupant of this echoing expanse. My room awaited at the hallway's terminus. The key turned in the lock with a resonant clack. Stepping inside, I was met by a pervasive chill that the sealed window failed to repel. I flicked the wall switch. A lone bedside lamp cast a weak, amber circle. The bed itself appeared substantial, crowned by a towering wooden headboard. A diminutive writing desk occupied one corner. Depositing my valises, I secured the door behind me, sealing myself within the cool silence. With the evening meal still an hour away, I resolved to undertake a preliminary reconnaissance of the manor. Locking my door, I retraced my steps along the hushed corridor, passing numerous closed portals behind which no sound stirred. My own footfalls were the only punctuation in the stillness. Turning into a lateral passage, my attention was caught by a door left slightly ajar, Curiosity piqued, I peered within. It opened onto a disused drawing room, furnished with spectral shapes draped in dust cloths, a cavernous hearth, and towering bookcases laden with neglected volumes. A single naked bulb overhead shed a feeble glow upon the scene. I entered, the air thick with inertia and the faint, papery aroma of decay. On a low coffee table lay a sheaf of letters. Their antiquity was apparent. The envelopes were sallowed by time. The ink of the addresses faded almost to invisibility. A flicker of temptation urged me to peruse them, but deeming them likely part of the house's archives, I resisted, placing them back and resolving to inquire about them with the proprietor later. As I straightened, a delicate creak sounded from directly behind me. I spun around. The room remained empty, watching. Minutes later, I located the dining hall. It stood vacant, dominated by a long, dark wood table whose surface held only a muted reflection of the dim lighting. A dozen high-backed chairs stood sentinel around it. From the direction of the kitchens, the aroma of simmering broth drifted. Soup, perhaps, or a stew. A pang of hunger reminded me of the approaching dinner hour, so I decided to wait there. Standing by a tall window, I gazed out at the grounds surrendering to night. Topiary hedges loomed like hulking beasts, and the skeletal branches of ancient trees clawed at the deepening gloom. My mobile phone vibrated in my pocket. Retrieving it, I saw the stark declaration, "No service." A curse escaped me under my breath. A technical anomaly, I reasoned, or perhaps just the insulating effect of these thick, old walls. Dinner was a Spartan affair. The anticipated soup, coarse bread, a medley of root vegetables. Afterward, the proprietor reiterated his counsel. I was free to explore the accessible portions of the manor, but strongly cautioned against venturing into the basement or the derelict west wing, citing ongoing hazardous restorations. I offered my thanks and climbed the staircase once more. This time, the upper hallway possessed a subtly altered character. The electric lights sputtered intermittently, and a low, persistent hum vibrated in the air, faulty wiring, I surmised, or the soughing of wind through unseen cracks. Upon reaching my room, the familiar chill greeted me. I shut the door, changed into looser attire, and settled at the small desk, intending to chronicle my initial impressions. The manor's sprawling layout, the simple meal, the peculiar stillness of the drawing room. My penmanship, however, betrayed a slight tremor in my hand. "Relax," I admonished myself. It was then that the first whisper materialized, soft as moth wings against the dark, seeming to elongate my name. "Elias." I froze, my pen arrested mid-stroke. My gaze swept the room, the patterned wallpaper, the imposing bedstead, finding nothing amiss, yet my heart hammered against my ribs. Rising, I opened the door and scanned the corridor. Empty, vacant. I shook my head, attributing the sound to fatigue. Bolting the door anew, I returned to the desk. Taking several deliberate breaths, I forced myself to write, detailing the architecture, the evening meal, the odd sensation in the drawing room. Around midnight, conceding to exhaustion, I extinguished the lamp and burrowed beneath the bed covers. Sleep remained elusive. The house murmured around me, a symphony of settling timbers, creaks, snaps, faint clicks. The wind sighed against the window panes. Intermittently, a fleeting susurrus, like a distant voice, teased the edge of my hearing, but I consciously dismissed it. Eventually, I succumbed to a fitful doze, only to be violently wrenched back to consciousness, pulse thundering by the whisper, now sharp, immediate, breathed directly beside my ear. Elias. I bolted upright, heart seizing. The room lay steeped in darkness, save for a sliver of moonlight partitioning the heavy curtains. My breathing came in ragged gasps. Fumbling, I reignited the lamp. The room remained unchanged. Desk, chair, bed, walls, the securely closed door. My thoughts, however, were a chaotic whirl. This felt terrifyingly distinct from any dream. Leaving the lamp burning, I decided vigilance was preferable to vulnerable sleep. I dressed again and eased the door open. The corridor lights cast long, weak shadows. Silence reigned initially. Then, as I took tentative steps, a faint tapping reached me, rhythmic, like the fall of slippered feet on bare wood. Drawn by the sound, I rounded a corner. At the corridor's far extremity, silhouetted against a tall, mullioned window, stood a shape, indisputably human in form, yet obscured by the profound shadows. A knot tightened in my stomach. A chill traced its way across my shoulders. My legs felt unsteady, but I compelled myself forward. The figure seemed to pivot slightly before melting away down an intersecting passage. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin in the vast quiet. No reply came. I stood rooted, torn between retreating to the relative safety of my room and the insatiable curiosity driving me onward. I had to ascertain the nature of this apparition. Flesh and blood, or something else entirely. Slowly, muscles taut, I advanced. Reaching the spot near the window where the figure had stood, I found only empty air and deepening shadows. The corridor stretched onward, a tunnel lined with closed doors and age-darkened paintings. One canvas hung askew. Instinctively, I reached out to straighten it. As my fingers brushed the frame, I registered a faint current of air on my right cheek. It emanated from a narrow, concealed door, recessed into the paneling and standing partially open. Hesitantly, I approached. It revealed a tight spiral staircase descending into blackness. The proprietor's warning echoed: restricted areas, the basement, the west wing. I peered down into the void, straining my ears. And then I heard it again, the whisper, ephemeral as a draft through a keyhole. My hand instinctively went to my pocket for my phone's light, only to remember it lay on the bedside table. My pulse throbbed heavily in my ears. I edged onto the topmost step, allowing my vision to adapt to the Stygian gloom. The stairs protested under my weight with weary sighs. The air grew progressively colder as I descended, carrying the subterranean scent of damp earth and stone. At the bottom, I found myself in a narrow passage with unadorned walls, the low ceiling braced by rough-hewn wooden beams. A single, bare bulb dangled from a wire. Pulling the attached chain, it flickered reluctantly to life, illuminating stacked crates along one wall, precarious towers of antique books, and several rolled-up carpets thick with dust. In a corner sat a small, stout wooden cabinet, secured with a heavy padlock. Resting atop it, startlingly similar to those I'd seen in the drawing room, lay another clutch of letters. One envelope was torn open. I lifted it. Dated 1921, the brittle paper contained cramped script describing unusual noises in the night, an unsettling sensation of being observed, and explicitly mentioning soft voices heard in the corridors. A wave of dizziness washed over me. The century-old words mirrored my own nascent experiences with uncanny precision. Replacing the letter, I surveyed the cramped space again, a sense of confinement pressing in. Abruptly, a scraping sound echoed from behind me. I whirled, heart leaping into my throat. A shadow detached itself from the deeper gloom, sliding across the rough stone wall, the distinct silhouette of a tall figure, seemingly clad in an old-fashioned greatcoat. I stumbled backward, colliding painfully with a crate. My breath hitched in short, sharp gasps. The silhouette drifted with unnerving slowness before dissolving back into the darkness from which it had emerged. A surge of pure panic gripped me, the feeling of being utterly trapped. My hands trembled as I scrubbed at my eyes, trying to pierce the gloom. The basement fell silent once more. My gaze fell upon a book lying near my feet. A guest register, its cover stamped 1930. Compelled, I flipped through its brittle pages. Entry after entry chronicled familiar disturbances, voices calling out in the dead of night, the persistent feeling of being followed. The handwriting in many entries was erratic, betraying the writer's agitation. I swallowed against a dry throat. The manor's history was steeped in these phenomena. A desperate urge to flee this subterranean space warred with a strange paralysis that seemed to root my feet to the cold floor. After a moment that stretched into an eternity, I forced my limbs into motion. Ascending the narrow stairs, I placed each foot with deliberate care, striving for silence. The door at the summit remained closed but yielded to my touch. I pushed it open and stepped through, finding myself in an unfamiliar section of the manor. The corridor possessed a vague resemblance to others I'd traversed, yet the quality of light, the arrangement of doors, felt subtly wrong. I attempted to orient myself, seeking the main artery leading back to the grand staircase, but soon realized I was disoriented. I blundered into a small, forgotten sitting room, its furniture shrouded in dust sheets before a cold, empty hearth. The air hung motionless and frigid. Again, the floorboards creaked behind me, and again, that insidious whisper coiled through the silence, repeating my name. Elias, Elias. Each utterance sent a jolt through my chest. Slowly, deliberately, I turned, bracing myself to confront the shape. The corridor stretched away, vacant. My legs felt leaden, my throat constricted. With immense effort, I propelled myself forward, walking blindly until, with a surge of relief, I recognized a familiar landscape painting near the head of the main staircase. From there, I hurried, almost ran, back to my room, slamming the door shut and fumbling with the lock, my shaking hands betraying my frayed nerves. I sank onto the edge of the bed, consciously attempting to regulate my breathing. My heart continued its frantic rhythm against my ribs. The entire manor felt sentient now, possessed of a watchful, pervasive intelligence, intent on capturing my attention through 1,000 unsettling subtleties. Leaning forward, resting my elbows on my knees, I listened intently. The only sound was the soft, rhythmic ticking of an unseen clock somewhere within the room. I waited, half expecting the whisper to resume its haunting cadence, but silence held sway. Eventually, exhaustion overriding fear, I lay back on the bed, still fully clothed. I left the lamp burning, its pale glow a meager defense against the encroaching dark. My eyes stung with fatigue, yet my mind raced, replaying the night's events, juxtaposing them with the fragmented narratives found in the letters and the guest register. The hushed voices, the pervasive chill, the unnerving sensation of being watched, the fleeting figure. Was it real? The experiences felt viscerally authentic. I pondered the figure's intent. Was it trying to guide me, to warn me, to communicate something vital? I had no framework for response. Closing my eyes, I willed myself toward oblivion. Morning arrived as a pale intrusion through the heavy curtains. I surfaced groggily, realizing I'd managed a few hours of shallow sleep, still dressed, the lamp faithfully guarding the room. My neck was stiff, my back protesting the awkward posture. Rising, I splashed cold water on my face from the basin in the tiny adjoining bathroom, confronting my reflection. Eyes bloodshot, underscored by dark crescents of fatigue. A powerful impulse urged me to pack my bags and abandon Blackwood Manor immediately. Yet the researcher in me resisted. I had come seeking the unique atmosphere of such a place, and this opportunity felt singular. Furthermore, a deeper, more unnerving curiosity now held me captive. I needed answers about the whispers, about the figure. Fear warred with fascination. Descending for breakfast, I encountered the proprietor. He inquired, with perhaps a touch more scrutiny than before, if I had slept well. I hesitated, then offered a non-committal nod and murmur of assent. He mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that the study contained various historical records pertaining to the manor should they prove useful for my book. I consumed my meal with preoccupied haste and made my way toward the indicated room. Located near the drawing room where I'd first found the letters, the study was lined with floor-to-ceiling shelves groaning under the weight of ledgers, albums of sepia photographs, and bound volumes of local newspapers chronicling the manor's long past. Opening several dust-jacketed tomes, I discovered numerous accounts corroborating the rumors, guest complaints stretching back decades, detailing strange voices, inexplicable moving shadows. One particularly chilling entry described encounters with a tall, silent figure glimpsed in the corridors, perceived by the writer as a guardian of some hidden sorrow. Reading this description, so resonant with my own sighting, sent a fresh wave of unease through me. As I stood absorbed in the brittle pages, a sharp tap sounded against the window pane. I turned quickly, expecting to see a wind-blown branch. Nothing. The tension in my shoulders ratcheted tighter. Checking my watch, I noted it was mid-morning. The proprietor informed me he had errands to attend to in the nearby village, meaning I would have the vast house entirely to myself for several hours. The prospect tightened a cold knot in my stomach, yet I remained in the study, delving deeper into the archives. I unearthed a folder containing handwritten testimonials from former guests. Many described bouts of profound insomnia, sudden, localized drops in temperature, and the recurring phenomenon of hearing their own names whispered by an unseen source. Several accounts detailed abrupt departures, the guests admitting they were overwhelmed by the oppressive atmosphere. Others rationalized their experiences, attributing them to overwrought nerves or the power of suggestion. As I sifted through these accounts, I distinctly heard footsteps shuffle past in the hallway outside the study door. "Is anyone there?" I called out. Silence answered. Moving to the doorway, I peered cautiously into the corridor, and there it was again. The shape, standing motionless at the far end, directly facing me. Still featureless, a mere silhouette against the gloom, but its presence felt intensely focused. My pulse leapt. Taking a hesitant step forward, I saw the figure slowly raise one arm, extending it to the side, pointing. The gesture felt deliberate, an unmistakable invitation or directive. A prickling sensation crawled over my skin. My breathing quickened. Compelled by a force stronger than my fear, I stepped out of the study. The figure glided silently to the left, disappearing around a corner toward a heavy oak door, the entrance, I presumed, to the forbidden west wing. I followed, maintaining a cautious distance, my senses hyper alert. Rounding the corner, I found the corridor empty. The oak door stood slightly ajar, revealing a space beyond marked off by a velvet rope barrier. Lifting the rope, I crossed the threshold. Dust lay thick as snow on every surface. The windows were crudely boarded over, admitting only slivers of external light. The air was markedly colder here, stagnant and heavy, yet paradoxically stirred by a faint, inexplicable draft. I moved slowly, my eyes scanning the spectral shapes of furniture shrouded in white dust cloths. Scattered across the floorboards, like fallen leaves, were more letters. As I bent to retrieve one, the whisper came again, directly behind me, my name uttered with a soft, urgent insistence. Elias. Every muscle in my body clenched. I spun around. The shadow stood mere feet away, emanating a palpable coldness that raised goosebumps on my arms. I clutched the letter I'd just picked up, my heart hammering so violently I could hear the rush of blood in my ears. The figure slowly, deliberately, raised its hand once more, the gesture ambiguous. A warning? A plea? My body felt strangely numb, paralyzed by a mixture of terror and awe. I tried to speak, to ask what it wanted, but my mouth was desert dry. I blinked, and in that instant, the figure vanished. I released the breath I hadn't realized I was holding in a ragged, shaky sigh. My gaze dropped to the letter clutched in my trembling hand. Its contents spoke of an important message that remained undelivered, of a persistent voice that had tormented a specific guest, following them day and night. The script broke off mid-sentence, unfinished. A jolt of anxious energy surged through me. These occurrences, I now understood with chilling certainty, were not random. Some consciousness, trapped or tethered to this place, was actively attempting to communicate. The whispers, the apparitions, the recurring motif of the letters, it all formed a coherent, albeit terrifying pattern. My mind reeled with unanswered questions, but my most immediate, visceral instinct was to escape this suffocating section of the manor. The thick dust, the oppressive cold, the sheer weight of unseen history made it difficult to draw breath. Pocketing the final letter, I turned and hurried back down the corridor, away from the decaying heart of the West Wing. The remainder of the day passed in a state of heightened nervous tension. Every settling creak of the old house sounded like a footstep. Every shift of light and shadow seemed like watchful eyes. My thoughts circled relentlessly around the pointing figure, the uncanny synchronicity of the letters, the sheer weight of experiences mirroring my own across decades. The boundary between objective reality and subjective perception felt increasingly porous. The voices called my name. The shape drifted through my peripheral vision. Was I succumbing to the power of suggestion in this intensely atmospheric place? Or was I truly encountering an entity desperate to bridge the gap between its world and mine? My intuition screamed the latter, even as my rational mind scrabbled for logical explanations. I resolved then, tonight would be different. I would confine myself to my room, securely locked, no more nocturnal explorations, no matter the provocation. Come morning, I would gather my belongings and check out, putting as much physical distance as possible between myself and Blackwood Manor before its whispers eroded my sanity completely. Ascending the stairs one last time, I entered my room, bolted the door, and wedged the small desk chair firmly beneath the knob for added security. I sat on the edge of the bed, the silence amplifying the anxious thrumming in my chest, my skin tingling with a dreadful anticipation. If the whispers began again, I vowed I would ignore them. If the figure manifested as a shadow beneath the door, I would remain steadfastly within. Surely I could endure one final night. Yet a deeper, colder certainty whispered that such resolve might prove fragile against the manor's pervasive influence. I stared at the thin, patterned walls, acutely aware that the voices might simply be waiting, patiently, just on the other side. Two hours past midnight, and the laboratory hummed under the spectral pulse of overhead fluorescence. A sterile sanctuary, usually mine alone at this depth of night. But the silence fractured. Footfalls, crisp and alien, echoed from the corridor's far end. My quiet dedication to the thesis, the comfortable solitude I'd cultivated amidst the glassware and circuitry, dissolved into a prickle of apprehension. Weeks I'd surrendered to the nocturnal rhythm of research, the steady thrum of machinery, and the faint, sharp tang of chemicals weaving a strange cocoon around me. Tonight, that fragile peace shattered. The steps advanced, measured, deliberate. I held my breath, gaze locked on the frosted glass of the lab door. It swung inward, framing a silhouette I knew, yet hadn't anticipated. Professor Alistair Finch, colleague to my own advisor. "Ah, Elara," he offered, his voice a discordant note of brightness against the late hour's hush. "I suspected I might discover you still at it." A smile felt brittle on my lips. Unease coiled low in my gut. Professor Finch, I wasn't aware anyone else would be burning the midnight oil. He slipped inside, letting the door sigh shut behind him. The soft click of the latch resonated with an unnerving finality. "Oh, the muse often strikes in the quiet hours," he countered, a vague gesture dismissing the absurdity of his presence. I pivoted back toward the glow of my monitor, hoping the gesture signaled a desire for solitude. Instead, I sensed his proximity, a looming presence at my shoulder. His breath, disturbingly warm against my neck, stirred the fine hairs there as he peered at the complex constellations of data splashed across the screen. "Such intricate work you're undertaking," he murmured. "Remind me, Elara, the precise vector of this inquiry. Shifting subtly in my stool created a sliver of distance. It's a novel framework for data encryption, I stated, striving for neutrality. Leveraging quantum entanglement principles to forge theoretically unbreakable ciphers. His gaze sharpened, an intensity flaring behind his spectacles that sent a shiver tracing my spine. Unbreakable, you say? Fascinating, utterly fascinating. Something dissonant in his tone, a departure from his usual detached courtesy, tripped an internal alarm. This sudden, focused attention felt invasive, almost predatory. It remains theoretical, I countered, minimizing the data display. Significant hurdles remain before any practical application. He emitted a low chuckle, a sound that vibrated unpleasantly, raising the hairs along my nape. Indeed, but even nascent discoveries can possess considerable value in the proper hands naturally. My pulse quickened, the implication hung, thick and unwelcome, in the sterile air. Was he suggesting? I pushed back my stool and rose, needing the physical space to counter the sudden claustrophobia. Well, the hour grows late. I should probably think about heading out. Professor Finch remained stationary, a sudden obstacle. His eyes, magnified by the lenses, seemed to pin me in place. Before you depart, perhaps allow me a closer examination of your findings. An outside perspective might yield valuable insights. Hesitation warred with a visceral urge to flee. He was established, respected, a colleague of Dr. Petrova. A blunt refusal could ripple outwards, impacting my academic trajectory. I appreciate the offer, Professor. I chose my words with care, but I feel it would be premature. Research integrity protocols, you understand. For an instant, the affable mask slipped, revealing something flinty beneath. Come now, Ilara. Are we not fellow scholars? Is the dissemination of knowledge not the very bedrock of our pursuits? I took an involuntary step back, the edge of the lab bench pressing against my spine. Of course, but this constitutes the core of my doctoral thesis. Sharing raw, unverified data at this juncture isn't something I'm comfortable with. Finch's smile was a mere crescent, devoid of warmth. I see. Though you realize, a promising researcher such as yourself could find significant advantage in broader support, both academically and, shall we say, financially. The suggestion solidified, chillingly unambiguous. My breath hitched. He wasn't merely overstepping. He was positioning himself to siphon away my work. I'm managing adequately, thank you, I replied, my voice firmer than the tremor in my hands suggested. Now, if you'll excuse me, I truly must be going. I moved towards my bag, but he shifted, intercepting my path to the door. I fear you don't grasp the potential I'm presenting, Ilara. Your discoveries could be paradigm shifting, yet lacking the right conduits, they might languish unseen. I possess those conduits. I can ensure your work receives the spotlight it warrants. My thoughts scrambled for an escape route. The emergency exit, alarmed. My phone lay tantalizingly close, yet inaccessible, nestled in my bag on the far side of Finch. I appreciate your perspective, I said, fighting for composure. But Dr. Petrova and I have a clear plan. His expression hardened further. Your advisor fails to comprehend the full ramifications. Others do. Individuals who would compensate generously for preliminary access to such research. The veil evaporated entirely. He was baldly stating his intent to broker my intellectual property. A surge of indignation sliced through the fear. That is not an option, I stated, voice low and steady. Now please, step aside. He advanced, his proximity oppressive. Trapped between the unyielding bench and his bulk, escape seemed impossible. Then my fingers brushed against cool glass. An idea, sharp and desperate. In a fluid, instinctive motion, I seized a beaker brimming with distilled water and flung its contents straight at his face. He recoiled with a choked gasp, sputtering, hands flying up to clear his vision. That precious second was all I needed. I pivoted, snatched my bag from the floor, and bolted for the door. You will regret this, his enraged voice echoed down the corridor, but I was already sprinting, the pounding of my own heart drowning out his threats. My hands trembled violently as I fumbled the car keys, the engine finally catching. Glancing in the rearview mirror as I sped away, I saw Finch emerge onto the steps, his face a mask of fury under the lone security light. The subsequent days unfolded in a haze of anxiety. The lab remained off limits. My apartment became a fortress where every creak and shadow amplified my paranoia. The imperative to act warred with a paralyzing dread. What if they didn't believe me? What if accusing Finch derailed my entire future? Yet beneath the fear, indignation smoldered. This was my intellectual blood, sweat, and tears. I would not be cowed into relinquishing it. Steeling myself, I requested a meeting with Dr. Petrova. Seated across from her, palms slick with sweat, heart thudding against my ribs, I recounted the events of that night in the lab, the words tumbling out in a rush. To my profound relief, Dr. Petrova listened not with skepticism, but with a growing, palpable anger. Her usual measured calm yielded to fierce indignation. This is utterly unconscionable, she declared, her voice tight with fury. We are taking this directly to the dean, immediately. What ensued was a disorienting sequence of formal meetings, tense investigations, and uncomfortable depositions. Professor Finch initially issued vehement denials, but confronted with incontrovertible evidence, including time-stamped security footage capturing his late-night presence and our confrontation. His facade crumbled. He confessed. It transpired I was not the first. Other students, other researchers, stepped forward with unnervingly similar accounts of coercion and attempted intellectual property theft. The revelations sent shockwaves through the department, culminating in Finch's swift dismissal and a comprehensive restructuring of research oversight and security measures. For my part, I plunged back into my research with a focus sharpened by adversity. The ordeal had undoubtedly scarred me, yet it had also forged a deeper conviction in the significance of my work. If it was worth stealing, it was undeniably worth defending, worth pursuing relentlessly. Months melted into focused effort, culminating in my thesis defense. Standing at the podium, articulating the culmination of years of labor, I felt a profound sense of victory that resonated far deeper than mere academic validation. I had confronted a direct threat to my intellectual integrity and emerged not just intact, but fortified. The ensuing applause was gratifying, yet the truest triumph lay in the quiet certainty that this knowledge, this creation, was unequivocally mine, earned through perseverance against calculated malice. As I exited the auditorium, Dr. Petrova intercepted me, her expression radiant with pride. "Stellar presentation, Ilara," she commended, and interestingly, we've already fielded several legitimate inquiries regarding potential applications of your encryption framework. Entirely above board, naturally. A grin spread across my face, a blend of exhilaration and vindication. That's incredible news. I'm eager to explore where this path leads. Stepping out into the bright afternoon sun alongside her, a wave of optimism washed over me. The road ahead remained uncharted, potentially fraught with new challenges, but the encounter with Finch had imparted an indelible lesson. In the vanguard of discovery, knowledge itself is currency, and safeguarding its integrity is as vital as the act of creation itself. Dawn's first hesitant light bled through the lattice of leaves overhead, painting spectral geometries across the desecration that had been my camp. Surveying the ruin, a tent fabric savaged, provisions strewn like offerings, a frisson coursed through me, colder than the nascent morning. It struck with the force of a physical impact, the certainty. I shared these woods, and eyes, unseen, had held vigil over my sleep. Months I'd plotted this solitary immersion, yearning to shed the city's clangor and weight. Gloomfang Forest, they called it, whispered of untamed depths and demanding paths. A seasoned trekker, I'd believed myself armored against nature's caprices, a fool's vanity. 2 days unfolded in near sacred perfection. I'd pushed deep, abandoning mapped routes for the pure thrum of wilderness, intoxicated by solitude, by the cathedral hush of ancient trees. The third night brought me to an idyll, a diminutive clearing beside a chattering stream, cradled by colossal pines. Slumber claimed me easily then, wrapped in the forest's gentle sibilance. Now, standing amidst the wreckage, that tranquility felt like a phantom limb. My fingers trembled retrieving the violated shell of my backpack. No mere beast wrought this havoc. The destruction felt calculated, infused with a chilling malevolence. Gouges scarred the tent's canvas, yet they were alien, too vast for any bear, too deliberate for feral rage. A flicker of steel arrested my gaze, I stooped, breath snagging, recognizing my own hunting blade. It had rested secure in its sheath within the tent. Now it lay embedded in the loam, its edge filmed with something dark, viscous. My heart hammered against my ribs. I scanned the encircling tree line, suddenly naked in this small arena. The woods, yesterday a haven, now felt suffocating, its shadows pregnant with unknowable threats. Escape, civilization, safety. The imperative screamed. But attempting orientation, nascent panic tightened its grip. In my quest for the perfect sanctuary, I'd wandered far indeed from any charted way. The direction of my arrival was a blur. A dry twig cracked somewhere aft. I spun, the knife a desperate extension of my white-knuckled fist. Nothing, only trees receding into deeper shade. Yet the sensation persisted, a palpable weight of observation. Waiting. I salvaged what remained usable, cramming essentials into the torn pack. Sustenance, water, the small mercy of a first aid kit. Anything to prolong survival until the path revealed itself. While my hands worked, my mind raced, striving for rational thought, a plan. The sun climbed, dissolving the mist. Staying was untenable. The camp's destroyer might circle back. A confrontation I craved less than life itself. Motion was survival. Find the trail. Hoisting the pack, I winced, its lightness a stark reminder of my losses. The knife's heft offered scant comfort against the unseen. I chose a bearing that felt less wrong than the others and began to walk. The forest stirred with morning's chorus, avian calls, the scurry of small life in the undergrowth. But beneath it, a dissonant thrum persisted, a wrongness that set my teeth grinding. Hours dissolved into a monotonous traverse through the sylvan labyrinth. Trees blurred into uniformity, clearings echoed each other. I tried navigating by the sun, keeping it to my left, praying it would guide me eastward, homeward. But as the day bled towards afternoon, the forest yielded no sign of relenting, and doubt, insidious as ivy, began to coil. Mid-afternoon brought it, a sound alien to these woods, a low, chthonic rumble emanating from everywhere and nowhere. I froze, marrow turning to ice. Again, the growl nearer now. Something stirred amongst the trees, just beyond clear sight. Flickers of motion, a swathe of dark pelt, the unnerving glint of eyes from the gloom. Reason shattered. I bolted, crashing through tangled brush, directionless, heedless of stealth. Branches lashed my face, roots clawed at my ankles. Pursuit thundered behind me, a heavy body smashing through the woods. How long I ran, I cannot say. Time dissolved in the frantic green smear. Lungs ablaze, legs screaming, still I surged onward. Then bursting into a small glade, momentum betrayed me. The earth simply vanished. A precipitous ravine yawned ahead. I skidded to a halt on the lip, arms flailing, balance a desperate gamble. Stones and soil crumbled beneath my boots, whispering into the shadowed abyss. The growl again, directly behind. Slowly, agonizingly, I turned, knife extended, my hand quivering violently. It stood poised at the clearing's edge, a hulking silhouette defying simple description, larger than any bear, limbs long and corded with power, draped in dark, matted fur. But the eyes held me captive. They burned with an alien cunning, a hunger disturbingly aware. An eternity seemed to pass in that mutual stare, my thoughts fragmented, trying to reconcile the impossible presence before me. Such a creature should not exist. Yet here it stood, regarding me with those dreadful knowing eyes. It took a ponderous step forward. Options evaporated. The chasm behind promised oblivion. Facing this monstrosity felt no less final. In that sliver of indecision, it lunged. Pure reflex hurled me sideways. Its mass hurtled past, momentum unchecked, straight for the ravine's brink. Claws scrabbled, seeking purchase on the treacherous scree. Too late. With a bellow blending fury and sudden terror, it plunged from sight. I lay prone, breath tearing through me, reality staggering. Silence descended, broken only by my own ragged gasps. Tentatively, heart pounding a frantic rhythm, I crawled to the edge, peered down. Nothing. No sign of impact, no broken form. Just mist coiling in the depths, swallowing secrets. Scrambling back, mind reeling. What was that? And crucially, were there more? The sun dipped low, painting the sky in fiery oranges and bruised purples. I couldn't remain. Nightfall promised horrors amplified, unknowns made manifest. Keep moving. I chose a direction, any direction, and walked. The earlier panic had cauterized, leaving behind a granite resolve. Survive. Find the way out. Night fell, and I pressed on. The moon offered a skeletal light, sculpting long, dancing shadows that teased the periphery of my vision. Every forest noise was a jolt, every rustle a fresh surge of adrenaline. But I did not stop. Near midnight, I saw it, a faint, steady luminescence piercing the distance, a trick of tired eyes, a phantasm born of fear. Closer now, hope, fragile but insistent, began to bloom. A light, an electric light. I broke into a stumbling run, heedless of the clamor. Trees thinned abruptly, and then I was free, standing on the cusp of a small town. The light emanated from a gas station, its fluorescent benediction, the most beautiful sight I had ever beheld. Staggering towards it, the ordeal claimed its due. My legs buckled. I collapsed onto the cool pavement. The last image before darkness engulfed me was the startled face of the attendant rushing towards me. Consciousness returned in a sterile hospital room, adrift in a sea of concerned medical faces and skeptical police officers. Questions rained down. Where had I been? What transpired? What exactly had I witnessed in those woods? I recounted everything, the words sounding increasingly unhinged even to my own ears. Disbelief was palpable. Dehydration, exhaustion, perhaps a hallucinogenic plant. They offered plausible, mundane explanations. The lacerations crisscrossing my body, merely evidence of a panicked flight through dense undergrowth. But I know what I saw. I know what resides is hidden within the deep folds of Gloomfang Forest. And I know, with chilling certainty, that another will someday wander too far, another will learn the truth lurking in the shadowed corners of our world. As for Silas, my days of seeking solace in the wild are utterly extinguished. Yet sometimes, when night presses close and the wind keens at the window, my gaze drifts towards the distant dark horizon of trees, and I wonder uneasily if something out there in the vast, unblinking woods is looking back. A crystalline crack echoed through the skeletal hush of the deserted high-rise, ripping me from the rhythmic trance of my nightly polishing. My pulse hammered against my ribs. The building's vast emptiness was no longer mine alone. What began as another unremarkable shift, cocooned in silence, was fracturing, twisting into a lethal pursuit, where the map etched into my memory was my only shield against ruin. My name is Javier. For half a decade, Zenith Point has been my nocturnal domain, a 30-floor monolith I traverse as its custodian. No grand title, but the solitude suits, a quiet stage for the audiobooks that fill the hours between sweeping and scrubbing. I know this steel and glass giant, its every shadowed alcove and echoing corridor, from the penthouse Aries down to the subterranean warren of storage vaults. A familiarity I never imagined would become the currency of survival. Midnight had just breathed past when the glass splintered somewhere distant. I was navigating the cubicle farm on the 15th floor, the vacuum's whine my only companion. Illusion, perhaps? The building groaned constantly, settling its immense bones like a slumbering beast. But then came the voices, low, sharp whispers, slicing through the stillness, drifting from the elevator bank. Instinct killed the vacuum's motor. Silence crashed in, amplifying the frantic thudding in my chest. These weren't executives burning late oil or ghosts of forgotten paperwork. Intruders. 3, at least, judging by the cadence. I sank behind a partition, ears straining. Their words were fractured, distorted by distance, yet fragments pierced the quiet. Server room, tight window. My thoughts detonated. The 20th floor. The digital heart of Albright consolidated, pulsing with proprietary secrets. Whatever their purpose, it reeked of violation. Act. But how? I was the man who emptied bins, not a sentinel. My hand, slick with sudden sweat, fumbled for my phone. A desperate hope for connection, instantly extinguished. Dead zone. The tower's dense core often swallowed signals whole. I was electronically mute. Footsteps scraped nearer. The elevator dinged on my floor. They were here. Motion became imperative. Silent as a shadow, I flowed towards the stairwell access. Just as my fingers brushed the cool metal of the door handle, the elevator doors hissed open behind me. I slipped through, pulling the heavy door shut with a muted click, my breath catching in ragged bursts. A phone, the ground floor security station, held a landline. Reach it, unseen. Downwards I plunged, soft-soled shoes whispering on the concrete steps. 2 flights melted beneath me before the door I'd just used slammed open far above. A chill snaked up my spine. You, stop. The command, rough and non-negotiable, echoed down the shaft. Thought ceased, instinct ignited. I flew, taking stairs in twos and threes, the keys on my belt loop betraying me with a frantic jangle. Heavy footfalls pounded in pursuit, closing the distance. I burst onto the 10th floor landing, adrenaline searing through me, sprinting down the carpeted hallway. They were right behind me, their breathing harsh. Panic flared. A conference room door gaped open. I veered inside, launching myself beneath the polished expanse of the central table, pulling myself into the deep shadows. I held my breath, a statue carved from fear, as heavy boots stamped into the room. Lost him? One voice snarled, laced with frustration. Fan out, commanded another. Can't be far. I watched their feet patrol the perimeter. One pair halted inches from my refuge. My eyes snapped shut, bracing for discovery. Then a shout from the corridor. Think I saw him head this way. The boots pivoted, retreated. A rush of movement, and they were gone, pounding down the hall. Silence returned, thick and precarious. I waited, heart galloping, before easing out from under the table. This sanctuary was temporary. Their mistake wouldn't last. A plan surfaced, dredged from my intimate knowledge of the building's hidden arteries, the old service elevator. Seldom used, concealed behind a utility panel disguised as drywall. If I could reach it, ground floor, undetected. I crept from the room, every synapse firing. Above, their angry shouts reverberated faintly down the stairwell. I navigated the corridor, a wraith hugging the walls, speed balanced with stealth. The utility panel loomed at the hallway's terminus, bland, unremarkable, unless you knew. As my hand reached it, the stairwell door crashed open again at the far end. Sweep this level, now. My fingers trembled, sorting through the ring of keys, searching for the slender, specific cut. Footsteps hammered closer, louder. Click. The lock yielded. A triumphant shout erupted behind me. There! I wrenched the panel door wide, tumbling into the dusty space beyond, slamming it shut. No lock on this side. My mop, leaning nearby, became a makeshift barricade wedged under the handle, a fragile prayer for seconds. And there it was, the service lift, ancient metal doors parted slightly, an invitation. I lunged inside, jabbing the G button with a desperate finger. As the doors groaned shut, the maintenance panel shuddered violently from an impact on the other side. The descent began, a crawl through the building's guts. Muffled impacts and enraged cries filtered down from above. I prayed the lift's notorious symphony of creaks and groans wouldn't betray me. Passing the 5th floor, the car bucked, shuddered, halted. My own heart seized. Had they cut the power? Lights flickered, threatening darkness. Then, with a protesting groan, the elevator resumed its slow plummet. When it finally sighed to a stop on the ground floor, I was already tensed to bolt. The doors whispered open, and I surged forward, directly into the firm grip of a uniformed police officer. Relief washed over me, so potent it buckled my knees. The lobby teemed with blue uniforms, weapons ready. "Sir, you okay?" the officer asked, his grip steadying me. I could only nod, breath still lost somewhere between the 10th floor and this sudden sanctuary. From the main elevator bank, noise erupted. The intruders, faces masks of disbelief and fury, were being escorted out in handcuffs. My frantic, unplanned flight, it turned out, had tripped a cascade of silent alarms. The security system, often just a background hum in my routine, had been my unseen guardian. The next hours dissolved into a haze of statements, questions, and lukewarm coffee. Corporate espionage, they called it. A professional crew after Albright Consolidated's digital crown jewels. If not for my presence, my panicked run that painted a target on my back, but simultaneously sounded the alarm, they might have vanished into the night with everything. Dawn was staining the city skyline when I found myself slumped on the steps outside Zenith Point, watching the last police cruiser disappear. An exhaustion deeper than muscle fatigue settled into my bones. Mr. Albright, the CEO himself, emerged and sat beside me, his expression somber. "Javier," he began, his voice low but resonant. "There aren't words adequate to thank you. You averted a disaster for this company." I managed a shrug, uncomfortable under the weight of his gratitude. "I was just trying not to get caught," I mumbled. He shook his head firmly. "You could have hidden, waited them out. You didn't. You acted. You protected more than just yourself. You protected all of us." He paused, studying me. "Our head of security retires next month. After tonight, I can't imagine anyone I'd trust more with Zenith Point's safety." I stared, momentarily speechless. "But I sweep floors," I managed, the protest weak even to my own ears. A faint smile touched Mr. Albright's lips. "You're the man who outmaneuvered professional thieves, armed with nothing but your wits and an encyclopedic knowledge of this building. I'd say you're considerably more than just anything." As the sun climbed higher, painting the glass towers gold, something else began to rise within me, a nascent flicker of pride, a sense of capability I hadn't known I possessed. I met Mr. Albright's gaze and nodded. "I'd be honored, sir." The night had irrevocably altered the landscape of my life. I'd stared into the abyss of fear and walked away. A hidden reservoir of strength had been tapped. Standing up, ready for a future suddenly rewritten, I understood. The structure I knew intimately, the place of my quiet labors, held more secrets than I'd realized. And apparently, so did I. The next time I entered Zenith Point, it wouldn't be pushing a cleaning cart, but carrying a new weight of responsibility. The night custodian had vanished with the shadows. In his place stood the new guardian, ready to defend the building and its occupants with the same resourcefulness born of terror. Life, it seemed, specialized in unexpected architecture. Sometimes the very foundations you take for granted, a familiar building, a routine existence, become the launch pad for something extraordinary, All it requires is the nerve to move when the moment shatters the silence. Gazing up at the soaring lines of Zenith Point, I knew I was ready. We are all architects of more than we know. Sometimes it just takes the crucible of one long night to reveal the blueprints.